Okay, welcome everybody. Let's begin. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to the sublime one, the worthy one, the fully enlightened one. So, I see a lot of new faces today, and some old ones, which is always good. Um, is there anybody here who hasn't come to any of my events that I'm new to them? They don't know who I am. Oh, good. Okay. Are you guys pretty new to the Buddhist Center, or just to me? Do you have our website that has the okay? Well, our website has all the teachers' information. It has the different calendar of events throughout the week. Let me get that for you. I technically sleep here as well, since I can't remember the last time I took my AVI to another sim. I pretty much come into Second Life to do my events and I go home. Or log out, as I should say. Okay, I'm having a little issue getting the website. I'll make sure to get it at the end. So, I'll give an introduction. My name is Jayantha, formerly known here as Ferox. I've been on staff at the Buddhist Center for about 2 years. Um, I do a couple different things here. I'm a 34-year-old lay Buddhist disciple of the Theravada tradition who was currently on the path to moving towards ordaining as a monk, but haven't started yet. So I am just a lay disciple. What that means is just as a regular Buddhist practitioner, not a monk or a master or guru or anything like that. I do a few things here, mainly a Basics of Buddhism class on Sundays. Then I do a metta meditation Thursdays around this time, and Tuesdays we do a Dhamma talk. Now, if you're familiar at all with Dhamma talks from the monks, the traditional method is that they speak for a half hour or an hour, and then after that, there's a question and answer period. You're supposed to hold your questions off until then. Since I'm not a monk, and since I like facilitating some discussion, never feel like you're interrupting me if I'm talking and you want to make a comment or ask a question or anything like that. This is as much as it's good that I can yap on about Dhamma for 40 minutes. It's a lot better when we can all talk and discuss, and everybody can put their input into this. So, thank you very much. Yes, and if you go slash schedule, I think you can see the schedule. But we have many different monastics from different traditions. Actually, we have two old monastics who've been teachers here in the past who weren't for a while because of real life stuff. They're coming back. Venerable Yuta Dhamma, who's a Theravada monk, and Lama Lodro, who's a Tibetan monk. So I'm excited for that. We also have two pragmatic Buddhist monastics. Pragmatic is like Western Buddhism, Venerable Wayne and Venerable David. And we have a lot of different teachers of different traditions. Like myself, I'm from the Theravada tradition. So I figured I didn't come up with. Normally, what happens is I do my walking meditation in the morning, and a topic comes to me, and no real topic came to me. Although I did look at my list of topics that I've thought of in the past, and I have a topic if we need to back up on that. However, since I see a couple new people, a good amount, I figured maybe we could do a question and answer. If you have any basic questions about Buddhism or meditation or anything like that, that you'd like to, ask a question or discuss, we can do that. If not, then I can back up to my topic that I decided to do. So if you have any comments, questions, anything, regarding pretty much anything about Buddhism, I can't guarantee you an answer, but I can at least try to get you in the right direction. And let's try to get some questions from somebody other than evil. Evil, don't make me discourage you. I know. You can always ask questions, but that's what I love about evil. Evil is the consummate searcher, right? She always has questions. I love that. So no, of course you can say something. Never let me discourage you from that evil. A lot of times, if you're new to Buddhism, there's you don't know that there's a lot of questions to ask. But either that, or you're pretty confident and set on your path, and you don't have much questions to ask either. So. Okay, yeah, of course. Okay, tell us as much as you feel comfortable in telling in relation to the question. Are you sure that's not a Unitarian Universalist temple? Do you know who they are? Oh. The UUs are great people. I love them. I know some of my friends here on the Second Life are UUs, and I've gone to their meetings and stuff like that. It's an interesting bunch, but so we don't get too far. You betcha. So it offends you in what way? I mean, why it's a mix mash? Why is a company doing a? Is it like one of those like programs to teach people, um, teach people how to be, what's the word? I'm going blank. One of them programs that they teach people cultural sensitivity. That's what I'm looking for. That's big in like the workplace and stuff like that these days. Cultural sensitivity. They tell you to be mindful, but they don't tell you how. So how is that like a mashup of a bunch of different traditions? Well, I'm trying to understand the the goal. What is the goal of doing this in the first place? Is it just like trying to improve productivity and you know lessen stress and all that kind of stuff? Is that what it is? Well, do you remember Ajahn Brahm, the story about when he says, moving the wheelbarrow is easy, thinking about it is the hard part. And in a way, your boss does kind of sort of have a point. If you work 100 hours, if you're mindful, it doesn't seem as bad. um, I can't say that I work 100 hours a week. I definitely don't, but I definitely work more than 40 most of the week. Emergencies, late nights, and all that kind of stuff. And it's one of those things where the practice helps you kind of accept it and to not let it hurt you. You know. Oh, say that's the new aginess of it, right? They have like catchphrases and this is be here now and all this stuff. But like you said, there's no okay how. How do you be here now? Do you go to therapy? Do you go to a meditation center? You know. The Buddha taught us how to be here now 2,600 years ago. Because it's, you know why? It's probably because it's a half-hearted or half-assed way of going about things, right? They kind of see that there's an issue, but they just don't kind of know how to go about dealing with that issue. They kind of see that they're looking in the right direction, but they just don't understand how to go all the way. I think that's what it seems like more than anything. Now, if they had somebody come in and do something like lunchtime meditation, then that would make a little bit more sense because, like you said, that's giving you something to work towards doing that. And that's something that you could say, hey, listen, and it doesn't even have to be a class. It could just be, it could just be people coming together during that time on their own and doing it. You don't necessarily have to wait for the company to bring somebody in. But yeah, that what it is they're not following through because they probably don't know how to. It might behoove somebody like you who kind of knows to maybe take charge, be a little bit of an activist, and say, okay, well, to the bosses, well, let's do this. And if they don't want to do it, then organize the workers, right? Isn't that what unions are all about? And stuff like that. Organize the workers and say, okay, well, we're going to do a meditation, group. Well, that kind of reminds me of people who practice in the first place, right? If they don't see any benefit or they don't know what they're doing, they're like, this meditation, this Buddhist stuff is crap. What am I wasting my time for? And then they don't do it. I was at that point a couple times. I never said this Buddhist stuff is crap, but I'm down myself. I said I can't do this meditation stuff. This stuff is killing me. Now I know how to be kind to myself and to let go and all that stuff. But back in the day, they brought in this Zen guy. Let's see, I might have missed a few things. I'm just gonna check the. Well, I think that it depends on the person, really. I think that there are uh, corporations and bosses that do care about the people, but then there's also corporations and bosses that don't care, and it's not even in the private sector. I work in state government. I do child protective services. I've experienced both the boss who was punitive, who threw around disciplinary, threats, and who basically, in a child protective service, who worked for 25 years in dealing with families and children, had no idea how to deal with people, right? And I have a boss who's the opposite. She advocates for us. She understands. She talks to us. She actually listens to us. So there's two, whether it's private sector, public sector, it doesn't matter. You're going to have crappy bosses. You're going to have good bosses. A boss who is learned about managing people knows that you will always get people to do more by having them have respect and feel like they are part of a team, and what they do matters, and put forth ideals that want to be done. When people have that, they will go above and beyond. Whereas if it's, you better do this because this or that or this, they won't do it. They'll do only as much as they need to keep from getting in trouble, and even sometimes that, and they'll burn out. Whereas if it's a positive thing, they can do double or triple the amount of work, but they're doing it for a good cause, for something that they feel is worth it. So they do it. A good boss knows this. And all bosses should at least learn it. Let me see, I missed text again. The cats. The only cat that I'd ever accept as my boss is the grumpy cat. That's it. Because I like that guy. He's funny. He cracks me up. He teaches me how to be a good Buddhist. The grumpy cat. Because basically everything he says, I think you do the opposite. That you're a good Buddhist. I have thankfully not ever had to deal with like big corporate settings. I never felt that I was the office type, and I'm still not. I really even in my job, there's a lot of office stuff. There's being in the office. There's reports. There's statistics. There's time frames. There's this and that. And of course, in the office, there's office politics, and this is so. I've never been an office person. What I like to do is get out in the field and talk to people and be with families and stuff like that. Being in the office stinks. That's why I don't think I'd ever want to be a supervisor or a manager, because then you're just in the office all day. They try to teach spirituality without any spiritual practice. It's the whole shtick. Well, that's big in general, right? In general, they not even in corporate settings, but just a lot of people today, they teach vipassana. Right? This is a vipassana center. But in reality, it has little to do with anything Buddhism. They just take everything out and they just teach vipassana. And there's some benefit to that. But when you're picking and choosing or taking little pieces out, you're missing the whole picture. And really, what the Buddha said is not so crazy or so religious, that people need to do that. There's the aspects of karma and rebirth and stuff like that people get hung up over. But even the Buddha said, whether you believe in those or not, whether they exist or not, the practice brings benefits here and now. So regardless if they exist or not, just doing the practice will make your life better. And I think people need to know this and know that, see what the Buddha taught as opposed to cultural Buddhism. They see cultural Buddhism and they come from other religions and they see, oh wow, that kind of looks like what they did in my religion. And that kind of like, pushes them away sometimes. But if it's packaged in something like Western Buddhism, pragmatic, what's it called? I almost said sexual Buddhism, and then I cracked myself up. Secular Buddhism. There you go. Well, sexual Buddhism is the tantric Buddhism, but anyway. So people feel better about the practice itself if it's not put in what they consider a religious package, because what they know of religion they totally reject. They don't want, and I understand that. I came from the Catholic religion, so I see that as well. I've always been agnostic. I don't prove or disprove a God or rebirth or anything like that, or even karma, however you want to say it. I don't know if it's this universal law of cause and effect per se, because I don't know it with my own experience. But what I do know is I see it in my life now. I see that what you do now creates your world tomorrow, the next day, the day after that. And when you see that, it's not so much of a stretch to think, if there's rebirth, maybe, yeah, it does affect my next life, But even that, it's not a requirement, and the Buddha never said it was a requirement. If people like that dislike the religious packaging, see the true teachings, just the teachings, nothing else added to it, then they would feel, I think, better about it. But I guess that's kind of a little bit off the subject of, but also somewhat related. So let's see if I missed any other chat, and if anybody has any other comments or questions. It doesn't have to be exactly on this topic if you have a question on another topic. The Buddhist teaching, in essence, is so simple that even a monkey mind can do it, right? even the monkey mind. But there's cultural additions and other things that added to it. Now, what is this class? Like, how long is it? I'm interested in learning more about this class. Oh, so it's like what is it, like a once a year thing, or a one time thing where they fill you with a bunch of wordy babble and then you're done? Oh, right, livelihood. Okay. That's simple enough. Hey, tell me when it's over. Well, right livelihood means a couple different things. In essence, it's basically living your life in a manner that is skillful. Uh-oh. Can you hear me now? I see your dot works now. Okay. So, in essence, right livelihood is a couple things. But it's really living your life in a manner that is skillful. When we're talking about skillful and unskillful in Buddhism, what we're talking about performing actions of body, speech, and mind that are beneficial to both you and to others. So when people hear right livelihood, they hear one part of what the Buddha said when he talks about right livelihood is avoiding occupations such as making weapons, cutting, being a butcher, making or selling intoxicants. So what else is there? I think that's pretty much it. Being a slaver, somebody who deals in buying and selling of humans, this kind of stuff. So that's what people think when they think right livelihood, but it's actually more than that. In this link here, I'll give you a link to it's Sama Jivo, right livelihood, directly from the suttas, directly from what the Buddha talked about when he's talking about right livelihood. And if you see up top, a balanced livelihood. This is the first time I saw this. This is interesting. I said, Buddha is like should be one of them. Who's that woman that always talks about finances and stuff? There's a woman, and then there's a guy who's a stock market guy. So Buddha should be one of these people who teaches people about how to Susie Orman. Because listen to what the Buddha says here in Vajrapaja. A householder, knowing his income and his expenses, leads a balanced life, neither extravagant nor miserly, knowing that thus his income will stand in excess of his expenses, but not his expenses in excess of his income. So what is Buddha saying? Part of right livelihood, living within your means, something that nobody does anymore. Absolutely nobody does. Yeah, David Ramsey. Yeah, that guy. So, living within your means. Also, just as the goldsmith or an apprentice of his knows on holding up a balance that by so much it is dipped down or by so much it is tilted up, even so a householder knowing his income and expenses leads a balanced life, neither extravagant nor miserly, knowing that his income will stand in excess of his expenses. So, this is part of this, and here I'll go back to what I was saying. This is wrong livelihood for lay followers. Lay followers should not engage in 5 types of business: business in weapons, human beings, i.e., slavery, meat, a butcher, intoxicants, drinks. This is what I missed: business in poison. You don't really see a businessman of poison these days. That was an easy one to miss, except for like killing rodents and stuff like that. Yes, exactly. What you're doing is you're trying to live a skillful life that's beneficial to yourself and others in every aspect. And that's what right livelihood is about. Whatever you do, is this job I do, is it beneficial to myself and others? I often ask that question about my own job. while it's not dealing in slaves or weapons or intoxicants, I often wonder, is this job really needed in many cases? But anyway, that's something that we can all do in our job. Like, right livelihood is interesting because it comes up. I remember reading about somebody who, he says, I work for a corporation. Parts of the corporation deals in weapons. The other parts deals in whatever else it was, and I deal in that part. Is it wrong? Am I performing wrong livelihood because I work for the corporation in a part that I think is okay, but there's another part of the corporation that he thinks is not okay. So that can get very complicated. And all of these things are gray. There's no such thing as black and white in Buddhism. Never has been, never will be. It just doesn't exist because there's no such thing as black and white in real life. People like to think about it that way because it makes it easier. But if you really look at real life, there's no such thing as black and white. So when it comes to stuff like the 5 precepts, right? The 5 precepts help you to live a right livelihood. And the 5 precepts are: I undertake the training rule to not kill, to not take what is not given, i.e. steal, to not lie, use harsh speech, gossip, all that kind of stuff, to not engage in sexual or sensual misconduct, depending on how you want to do that, and also not to take any drinks or drugs that cause heedlessness. So if you see those five precepts, and you go back to what the Buddhist says right livelihood, all of those things that he said not to do in right livelihood fall into the 5 precepts, right? So I just lost the train of thought where I was going, why I was rounding back to go forward. But that is part of the whole practice. And oh yeah, now I remember. And something like not killing. That seems black and white. But then you get into stuff like, my daughter has head lice. She came home with lice from school. Am I killing these beings? Is that going against the first precept? Right? It gets complicated. There's no such thing as black and white. And a lot of times, the question can only be answered by you. What does your gut feeling say? What does your wisdom on the situation say? So a lot of times you'll never get a straight answer from somebody like me, or somebody who is actually, probably better at giving advice in this regard, like a monk or something. I think what Cheyenne says right there, I just do the best I can. I think that's really all you can do. Do the best you can, and you be kind to yourself. Right there. So it's very complicated because it's not black and white. But on the other hand, you don't want to kill yourself over it either. Literally and figuratively. These are training rules. You're just trying to live a better life. And we all screw up along the way because we're all humans. We don't know. We don't have perfect wisdom. The Buddha is said to have perfect wisdom and compassion. We have neither. We're still working. We're still on that path. So because we don't have perfect wisdom and compassion, we don't know. We can only do the best that we can. Let's see. That leads the accounting department out. Why? Why is that? It doesn't say anything about not handling money. Oh. Who said something about the alcohol? There it is. I wanted to scroll back to see this. If people did not make beer, I would not have it to drink. Me is puzzled. It's funny because I find it interesting as well that I don't blame people who make guns because somebody takes a gun and shoots somebody. I don't blame bars, although governments do now, which I still think is ridiculous. I don't blame bars for somebody who drank at their bar, drove home drunk, and killed somebody. I don't personally, I don't think that that is the case. However, on the other hand, some people who are engaged in these employments, maybe they do feel, that they have some kind of they could have did this, they could have did that. I don't know, but I personally, because of self responsibility, which is huge in Buddhism. To me, you don't blame somebody else for what you did. So I would not necessarily think of a bar owner as an evil person. And I don't think that that's what the Buddha's trying to say either, that these people are bad people. I don't think he's trying to say that at all, because the Buddha never said anybody is bad. Except for Mara. He didn't like Mara that much. But poor Mara. Yeah, it's all in the intent. Yeah. Well, we're talking about consenting adults. Yeah, children, I don't know. Although, it gets into the practice of, in Europe and in other countries, the children have wine and stuff like that. So even in there, there's no black and white, right? So people who are more vulnerable to the influence. Yeah, on the new Buddhist forum, that reminds me, somebody posted about a thing about how now that a company can basically pay you if you want money. They can pay you. You can put like a temporary tattoo or something on you for like to advertise. And people were like, "Oh, these young women who do this, they're being taken advantage of, and blah blah blah, and this and that." And I don't know. Even I don't necessarily know if I agree with you in the aspect people who are vulnerable. It's true. I guess you would say, yeah, some people are more vulnerable. But tell that to the karma gods. There are none as far as I know, but just because you're a more vulnerable person doesn't mean that your actions won't have an effect in the universe, And it doesn't also mean that you don't have the ability to make those right choices. Now, if you're talking about somebody who's mentally ill or mentally handicapped, that's a different story. But in the average normal person has that ability to make that decision. Now, do they have the wisdom that it's the right decision? That's another story as well. It might not be the right decision, but they still had the ability as an adult to make that decision. When you take away that, they become a victim no matter what they do. And while being the victim is like a big thing these days, everybody wants to be the victim, because oftentimes that means maybe you can get a lawsuit in or something like that. That seems like that's like the American dream these days. It's not like to work hard, have a business, and make it in the end. It's to become a victim and get a big cash settlement and then move to Mexico or something. Some crazy thing like that. And that's Costa Rica, yeah. In Buddhism, there's no such thing as guilt. There's no such thing as being a victim. very true. Global pronouncements often don't. Yeah. You are a victim only of your own karma. Of course, there's also. Well, I don't want to say that, but not only of your own karma, but you're also a victim of genetics, of environment, and all these kind of things. All these play a role in all the causes and effects that happen in your life. But considering yourself a victim is living in negativity. Accepting what happens is living in positivity. It's being here now. The catchphrase of the day. There's people who have gone through some really, really bad stuff, like rape and all this kind of stuff. And even that, they are definitely what you would consider a victim. But if you look at the therapy and stuff like that, they, in the therapy, they're not keeping you mired in that victimness. They're bringing you forward through it. The therapist is not like, oh, poor you, victim. Yes, you're going to be a victim for the rest of your life. You're just going to have to deal with it. Yes, that's a good, yeah. That sums it up very well, Cheyenne. Everybody deserves metta. Even Hugo Chavez. May he hopefully have a decent rebirth. Maybe he'll be reborn as a monk. Yes. Send metta to all. Do you guys know who Hugo Chavez is? Yes, was exactly. Hence why I said may he have a good rebirth. Maybe he'll next rebirth he'll come back as a monk and he can get to practice some Buddhism. Hugo Chavez was the if you want to say dictator of Venezuela. Some people call him a dictator. Some people liked him. I thought he was funny in a George Bush kind of way because they. Both of them said the craziest stuff that I thought was funny. Oh yes, he was elected. Yes. Hugo Chavez just cracked me up. They say he is a bad guy. He probably was. He probably did a lot of bad things, but that doesn't mean that we don't give him metta. Even Adolf Hitler deserves our metta. There's no being in Buddhism that is beyond our metta. Yes, even lice. Well, now let's not get into politics. I only said George Bush's because George Bush also said a lot of funny stuff. I don't like Obama that much because he's not funny. He's kind of boring. I like people who say crazy funny stuff. We had a governor in my state a couple years ago who was the same way. Every time I heard him speak, I loved it. I was like, oh, what is this guy gonna say this time? Yeah. Just hopefully don't vote on people based on that. uh, but if they're already in office, I can enjoy them. That's thinking positive. It's difficult. It's difficult for us because we already have a preconceived idea of justice and love and all of these things. And when you come to Buddhism, it's a totally different mindset. Totally different. And it's hard to accept for a lot of people. Like Ajahn Brahm says, there's no such thing as a murderer, only somebody who's murdered. There's no such thing as a rapist, only somebody who's committed rape. And I agree with that. There's no such thing as a crazy genocidal dictator. There's only just somebody who's killed millions of people. And that person had love for some people. Adolf Hitler loved his dog. Loved his dog. He also loved his family. He just didn't like a whole group of people. There's not one person who does not have some love and some goodness in them. Even somebody who we may demonize to the core. And because we know that all beings wish to be well, happy, and peaceful, no matter what their perspective or perception is, they still wish to be well, happy, and peaceful. And we like to be well, happy, and peaceful. Then we can give metta to all. Some people might like to say, "Oh, good. I hope Hitler came back as a rat." Or if you know more about Buddhism, you can say, "I hope he was in the hell realms or the hungry ghost realms," or something like that. But the great thing about Buddhism is, right, the hell realms, the hungry ghost, the realms of the woeful states, as the Buddha called it, they are all impermanent. You don't go to a hell realm forever. So even Hitler himself will eventually be an arahant, an enlightened being. And when we see this, I think that allows us to understand that judgment of ourselves, of others, is something that is not beneficial. It is not skillful to our lives. The Buddha said there are three conceits. I am better than this person. I am worse than this person. And also, I am equal to this person. What does that say? It's conceited to say I'm better. It's conceited to say I'm worse. It's conceited to say I'm equal. It's conceited to make any kind of judgment at all. Yes. But that's what our ego does. Oh, ego, thou art crazy. I love my ego. My ego is kind of like George Bush and Hugo Chavez. It makes me laugh all the time. Who else makes me laugh? The comedian who does the puppets. I like that guy. He always makes me laugh. So my ego is like all those guys. My ego is always like a comedian that's there. Because the more you see your ego in action, the more you just see how crazy and funny it is. And you just like, it's like you're watching a child running around doing all kinds of stuff. Yes, the dead terrorists. I kill you. I love that guy. Yes. Um, and the old guy and the crazy. Yeah. So that's like my ego. That's like our ego. And the more you practice, the more you see what your ego does. The more you get to laugh at it because it's just so funny. And you kind of wonder, like, who's controlling this ego? Who the heck is telling the ego to be like this? Because this ego is nuts. And then you start to think, okay, well, if I'm laughing at the ego, then what am I? And then that's when it starts to get really confusing, right? If the ego is not me, then where am I? Where is this me that I consider myself? And then you start to say, oh man, what did I stumble onto? Maybe the Buddha was telling the truth with this whole not self thing. It gets confusing at that point. But the only thing you can do is just keep practicing and observing. Oh, it definitely becomes freeing, but also confusing. Confusing at first. But yeah, when you are free of... I can't say I'm free of my ego, so I don't want to say when you're free of your ego, but when you start to practice enough that you can at least see your ego in action and where your thoughts come from, that's when it starts to get funny. A tool for living in the world, yeah. Lego my ego. So we have a couple more minutes. If there's any last comments or questions. This was a very interesting discussion. I liked it. Everybody was participating, and we had a lot of laughs, and I think we went through a lot of insight too. That's a good discussion, everybody. It's always better than hearing me talk for 45 minutes. Always. Why Theravada for me? That's a pretty simple question. What I'll say is I'll give you a little bit of history to kind of answer that question. I grew up Catholic. It never fit me. In short, it never fit my worldview. It wasn't me. The first experiences I have of Buddhism was the Dalai Lama. I mean, like most Westerners, when you know Buddhism, you know the Dalai Lama. So it's like, oh, like, the Dalai Lama, he's wise, he understands, like these deep things, and seeing him and monks, and I thought to myself about the monks, who are these guys? They're always laughing and smiling, and they have nothing, and they walk around in a robe, and they have a shaved head. It's like totally opposite of anything that I've experienced in my life, and yet they're always looking so happy and smiling. Who are these guys? And that's, I think, the first memory that I can remember that kind of got me interested into learning about Buddhism. And because I only knew about the Dalai Lama, I started learning about Tibetan Buddhism. And that, I guess, also never fit me. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of different. It just never, it reminded me too much a little bit of what I came from. There is a head monk, this guy, the Dalai Lama, it's kind of like there's a head pope, and this and that. And when I started reading the original, the oldest texts, and I started to learn more about Theravada, to me it clicked. I was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. Theravada is what I've been looking for. The teachings. And then I found also in Theravada, there's hierarchy. It's not to the extent of a Dalai Lama, but there's hierarchy and there's cultural Buddhisms and there's superstitions and this and that. All the stuff that I thought I didn't care too much about in Tibetan, I found the same, although to a lesser extent, but still there because it's human nature in Theravada. And from that, I found in the Theravadins, I found a group of monks who even reject all of that, and the only thing they teach, the only thing they live, is the original, what's considered the original teachings of the Buddha. Just the four Nikayas, not even all the extra stuff that's still in Theravada, but they just go to that, and that's me. That fits me perfect, because in a lot of ways, it's going straight to the core. There's nothing else added, and it's simple. It's understandable, but it's extremely deep. So for me, Theravada, with the focus on the original teachings, is Theravada. I mean, the focus on the original teachings is what I personally feel is the Buddhism for me. What you have to understand is there is no right Buddhism. In a lot of ways, there is no true Buddhism either. Sect, tradition. Even Theravada, which is the title of Theravada is Teachings of the Elders. It's considered the most orthodox. It's considered the oldest form of Buddhism. However, it is still pretty divorced from the original teachings of the Buddha. The original teachings of the Buddha, the only knowledge that we have of the original quote-unquote teachings of the Buddha is in those suttas, and there's no school today that just goes by those suttas. So even Theravada can't claim to be the only type of Buddha or the type of Buddhism, although they do. And then the Mahayana claims that they have secret teachings that the Buddha only taught certain people, so they even have better teachings. And so you have people between the different schools saying, Theravadins say, the Mahayanas, they got made up stuff. That's not what the Buddha said. And then the Mahayans say, no, we got secret teachings. What you teach is all selfish. It's just about you. We teach about bodhisattvas and all these things. So that's what some Mahayanas say. And then the Tibetans say, both of you are crazy. We have a third level. But you know what they say is, but see, this is the thing. The Mahayans, the people who are not caught up in the ego, and the people who are in those traditions who don't bash the other traditions, the Mahayans say, well, this is the one level. Then you get into Japan and China, and there's even levels of Mahayana, and there's even levels and traditions of Vajrayana. There's so many different sects and traditions in Buddhism, and you find that in any philosophy, any religion. How many different Christian types are there? You got Catholic. You got two types of Catholic. You got Roman and Episcopalian. Then you got Christian. You got evangelical. You got Lutheran. You got what else? Tons. And then you got even Greek Orthodox, yes. And then you get to even more. So there is so much, but I want to make sure that I go back to, because I think I might have missed a couple comments or questions while I was yapping on about the main differences of the Mahayana. What happened was, after the Buddha died, everybody, all the Buddhists, all the teachers, there's no such thing as a Buddhist back then, and there really is no such thing as a Buddhist today. It's the followers of Dhamma. the followers of the Buddha who followed his practice. So they got together and they codified. They put the teachings together. And then there was the next time they came together. They call them these councils. If you're familiar with church history, Catholic history, they had councils as well. So they had these councils, and at that point there was a group that mainly had disagreements regarding the rules for monks, and they were the Mahasangikas. And at that point there was they called the first rift in the Sangha, and the Mahasangikas went their own way. And that's how you get the birth of Mahayana. So the Mahayana is a different focus per se. No matter what tradition, they all have the same core beliefs, the same core teachings of the Buddha. The core teachings of the Buddha are the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, dependent origination, karma, really becoming, not rebirth, but I don't want to get into the whole technical wording of that. So all of those basics are in every tradition. The difference is how these basics are interpreted and how they are taught. That is the main difference. And the Buddha talked about the Dhamma, that is the practice, the teachings. The Buddha taught about the Dhamma as being a raft. The Buddha talked about crossing the stream of samsara to the other side. Samsara is our continued existence, being reborn over and over again because of our craving. Crossing that stream is going to your final life. You will not be reborn again. You have reached Nibbana. On the other side is Nibbana or Nirvana, depending on how you want to say it. And when you get to that other stream and you're going inland, what do? On the raft that you use, you pick up the raft and you carry it inland? No, you dump it on the side of the stream. So the Buddha said that this is the Dhamma, this is what the teaching is. When you get to that point, you don't even need the teaching anymore. You're beyond the teaching. So no matter whether you're a Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, which is Tibetan, and all the different breakdowns of Mahayana, the Soto Zen, Nichiren Zen, Chan, Pure Land, no matter what it is, it's all a raft to be dumped on the other end when you've reached the end, when you've crossed the stream. So I wouldn't worry too much about the different traditions, other than in the aspect of what do you think is the best raft for you? What do you think, in analysis of the different traditions, what is the best raft for you? For some people like me, boom, Theravada, or boom, Mahayana. That's my best raft. For other people, I don't really kind of have a built raft. I might have to kind of put my own sticks together and make my own raft and make it across. And if that works for them, that's good. It's not often suggested, but if it helps, if it's beneficial to their life, then you can't really argue it. So pretty much, yeah, it's what the Buddha did. The Buddha found the way, regardless of a lot of extricalities, a lot of cultural additions and all of these, and school traditions and all of these. He found the way just on his own. And really, in all reality, that's the same way that we have to find the way. Because no school or tradition can really tell us exactly how we have to find our own way. They're only guides. That's it. The Buddha was only a guide for us. That's what he said. He said, I cannot bring you to the other shore. I can only point the way. You have to do it yourself. Yes. Well, we are past time, so everybody who has to go, feel no guilt about that. Because we are past the time that we've had for this. I think we should end then, unless there's last questions. So, welcome to Buddhist Center. Nice to meet you all. I hope to see you in future events. Thank you very much. This has been one of my favorite classes, one of my favorite discussions. Lots of questions, lots of discussing. It was fun. I appreciate it all. So until next time, much metta to you all, and Sukhi Hantu. May you be happy.